Hey everyone, here is this adorable coat that I made for Henry using the Zachary and Zoe, I think I'm pronouncing that right, Zachary and Zoe pattern from the Bonnie Blue Designs. To begin, I cut out 2 sleeves for the lining as well as 2 sleeves for the coat. And you can see that the lining sleeve is just the same pattern piece as the coat sleeve, but the bottom portion of the sleeve is just folded up so that it's out of the way when I cut it. Then I have 2 coat front pieces as well as 2 coat front lining pieces. Again, notice how the pattern piece is folded so you can cut the lining piece without ruining that pattern piece or needing to trace 2 out. And then I lined up the edge of the lining front on the selvage edge. And then I got 1 coat back cut on the fold as well as 1 coat back lining cut on the fold. And finally you'll have 2 collars to cut out, and I recommend doing both of these out of your coat fabric. Now I am not a coat expert, but I am dabbling in some shaping techniques, and that's why you see these little stitches around my collar. I'm still learning and I'm not thrilled with how it turned out yet, so I'm not ready to talk about these, so FYI. But I lined the collar with some German interfacing strips. These come pre-cut for you and they are super convenient since you don't have to deal with full yards of interfacing at a time. Oh, and my final bit of advice for this collar is to do any embroidery work before you cut out your collar. That way you don't risk stretching your collar. And I do have a video that goes over the embroidery work for Henry's collar that is linked below. Alrighty, getting on with the sewing. First, I begin with sewing the piping to the collar's edge. I chose the coat side of the collar, but it really does not matter which. And then I joined the lining of the collar to that collar with right sides together, and sew that with the previous stitches that attach that piping facing up, with the goal of stitching just inside those previous stitches. This gives a really neat, clean transition from your fabric to the piping. And then I trimmed at that seam allowance, turned the collar right side out, and gave everything a really good ironing. And next I moved on to constructing the body of the coat. And I put little notches to mark the center front line as well as the folding line on both the top and bottom pieces of the coat. But honestly, I did this a little bit differently than what the pattern calls for. Just FYI, if you want to go by the pattern, I would recommend doing the notches, but to each their own. And then I joined the coat together at the shoulder seams. I press these seams open and then repeat the same thing to the lining of the coat, joining those together at the shoulder seams. Then I moved on to attaching the sleeves. And I did do a little stamped looking monogram on Henry's sleeve, and I will link that video down below as well. And then I eased the sleeve in using this technique where you put your finger behind your presser foot. And I have a more detailed video that I will link down below for that method as well. So after easing in all my sleeves on the coat as well as the lining, I sewed the side seams together, and I am really sorry, but I cannot find that footage to save my life. I'm not sure what happened, but all I did was put the coat right sides together, and I sewed from the wrist all the way down the sleeve to the underarm. I pivoted, and then I continued to sew down that side seam. And I repeated the same thing for the lining, and I ironed all of those seams open. And Henry's making these little sweet baby sounds in the background, just FYI if you're wondering. Then I put the lining together with the coat. Basically, you'll have the wrong side of the coat touching the wrong side of the lining, and you'll put the lining sleeves through the coat ones. And after ironing the selvage edge of the lining under and centering everything up, I basted the 2 together around the neckline. Now I'm leaving those coat center front edges free at this point. So I'm starting 1 inch or so past the lining edge, going around that neckline until I get to the other lining edge. Again, stopping about 1 inch or so before I get to the end of that lining's edge. I hope all that is making sense. Then I centered up the collar on the coat and basted that into place. Again, leaving the coat front edges out of this seam. And after I was done attaching the collar to the coat, then I went and folded those front edges over so the right sides were touching, and I sewed along the top of this. So it's right in line with those next stitches. I hope all of this is making sense. I believe this is a different method than what the pattern calls for, but this method allows you to tuck the raw edges of the bias strip under, as you'll see in a second. So you can see that if you turn the top of the facings right sides out, it gives a really neat, clean transition to that corner and the whole finish of everything. Lastly, I attached the bias strip, and honestly, I was trying out a new method here, but I would not repeat it again. Instead, I would cut my normal 2-inch wide bias strips that I've done in so many of my other videos. I would fold the sucker in half like I've done in a lot of my other videos, and I would attach the raw edge of that strip, of that folded strip, to the neckline. And I would attach and sew it in the same manner. So everything else that you're seeing is what I would do normally, but for some reason I decided to do this without it being folded, and like I said, I would not do it again, since now I have to fold that raw edge under twice, which is a pain in the butt in my book, and sew it down. So if you do the folded method like I normally do, then you're sewing down a folded edge, and so it's just a easier, cleaner transition. But anywho, you live and learn. But as you can see, that regardless of the bias strip methods, sew the facing at the top and bring the bias strip underneath, and that will allow for a very clean inside of your coat when you turn that facing right sides out. So after I sew the bias strip into place, then I iron that raw edge under and sew that down. But it's okay, we can make it through. But as I mentioned, I should have done a 2-inch wide bias strip and folded that sucker in half, and then I would be sewing down a folded edge right now instead. And yes, you could hand sew this down instead if you are not comfortable machine sewing it. So at this point, I have some hand stitching left to do. I folded the bottom of the lining of the sleeve up, as well as the bottom of that coat sleeve, until it was to the desired length, and then I will hand sew these together. Then I put the selvage edge of the lining inside the folded edge of the facing, and I will sew these together later on too. And finally, I turn up the bottom of the coat in the same manner as the sleeves and sew those together by hand. Now in all of these cases, I'm only going to go through the lining and the inside part of the coat. I am going to be very careful not to take my stitches to the right side of the coat. And then I sewed some hand buttonholes, but oh my goodness, I was kicking myself. I thought at the very end I should have done bound buttonholes, but it was too late. I will have to add that to my list for his coat next year. Wouldn't they be just so smart looking? Anywho, such as life. Overall, I think this is a really adorable and great first coat for his first winter. The pattern is really easy to sew together, and I love this wool. It is lightweight, so it's easy to sew with, but it's still warm. I hope this video was helpful. If you all have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer them. And as always, I appreciate y'all for watching, and I hope to catch y'all next time.